I know you all are excited as I am. We're having our webinar today being shared with us by Tom White. Our topic is technology delivering real-time competency, assessment, and contextual learning. I'm excited to hear what Tom is going to share with us. He is from Hula Partners, and so Tom, I turn it over to you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Janet, and hello everyone. Okay, thank you, and thank you to ATD Houston as well for letting me speak today in this webinar. The topic that we're going to cover today is, as Janet said, technology delivering real-time competency assessments and contextual learning. And I'm just going to introduce myself first and then the company I work for, and then we'll dive into exactly what that means and then take it from there. Okay, so let me just put this in presentation mode. Okay, so a bit about me first. As I said, I'm Tom White. I've got the camera on at the moment so you can see my face isn't as pixelated as the picture on the screen. I'm a product manager at Hula Partners. Have been so for around a year now. I started in Hula Partners probably 4 years ago when the company first came into being. For the first couple of years I started on our services side as an implementation consultant in our SAP SuccessFactors division. And then I really used that experience when 2 years ago I made the transition into our products division and started working with one of our managing partners here to build out Kahuna, the competency management product that I oversee. And then we designed it, developed it, and now are implementing it at a number of customers. I think a couple even might be on the phone today. That's a bit about me. I'm going to take off my webcam now so you don't have to look at my face for too much longer. And then I'm going to jump to more about me, more about Hula Partners. So Hula Partners, as I said, have been around for 4 years. We can really be defined into 4 different segments. We play in the HR talent technology space. And the segments you can see here on the left-hand side, architecture and roadmap services. So this is a lot of the consultative work that happens at the front of a project, where we work with clients on their business processes, looking at redesigning their HR model and how they work. We also in this area do some technology selection as well. We partner with companies and look at their requirements, review their requirements, and then look at the marketplace to see what will suit them. And then finally, specifically to competency management, architecture and roadmap services are really around building that content and that framework that you can later use to get all the benefits of competency management, some of which we're going to talk about today. The second pillar is technology and product innovation, and that's where I sit. I work with Jai Shaw, who is the managing partner over this division, and a team of functional consultants, implementation consultants, and developers. We have probably 3 production-grade technologies that we sell and implement at Hula, with Kahuna, the one I look after, being the largest of those 3. The next pillar is really where we came from as a company and our background, and that's our SAP SuccessFactors implementation and integration partnership with that customer, that company. And we go, as I'm sure you're probably aware of how this works, when a customer buys SAP, we'll go through and implement it and configure it to the customer's needs. The great thing about this division at Hula Partners and the technology division is that we work very closely together. So we use those real-world business processes and requirements, and that really is an input into our technology and how we build it. And then finally, we have something a bit more tactical in nature, the post-implementation support. So because of Kahuna, we created a really robust infrastructure for support tickets and questions, and we've leveraged that throughout the other 3 pillars as well. So if it's implementation of SAP, we have a support where we can configure that on an ongoing basis and support that post-go live. So that's a bit about our company. And you might have not heard of Hula Partners before, but I imagine you know some of these brands that we've got here in our customer list. We're really proud of this list. We've been around for only 4 years, and we've kept all of these customers. They're all referenceable, and you can see there's some big names here, or recognizable logos. Everything you see with this blue and black Kahuna logo means that we're doing some kind of competency management work there. So again, they're pretty recognizable names as well, pretty heavy in the oil and gas sector. And that's really because where I'm based in the Houston office Houston's pretty heavy in the oil and gas world. And really competency management has its lineage in oil and gas from the regulatory requirements that built out into more of a development space. So that's just some background about me and the company, and now to dive into the subject itself. So the subject, again, is technology delivering real-time competency assessments and contextual learning. And really, what does that mean? Just to build that out, we're going to just discuss what that means for a minute or two, and then dive into the problems that we're trying to solve with this, or some of the things that we can benefit from by focusing in this area. So this is all about how you can use technology, specifically stuff that users can hold in their hands and interact with on a daily basis. And that means that it's going to be a mobile device generally. That's what everyone has access to all the time in their hands. And how you can leverage this technology in the right way with the right softwares and business processes to drive your organization to accept, participate, and then own a culture of ongoing work-based assessments. And in the problem section of this presentation and this webinar, we're going to say why that's important. In addition to this, we can leverage the same technology to drive home learning and the delivery of learning in a consumable way that makes sense for the job you're performing in that given time. So you can learn anywhere, anytime, any place. So now the problem. What is the problem that we're trying to solve or trying to push towards and trying to get benefit from? And I think I like to break this down into 4 different segments. So the first being on the top left here, employee engagement. And I'm going to blow each one of these out in the next few slides. So employee engagement is a big topic right now in talent management and learning and development. The next one is the feedback gap, which is all about how people need feedback and the difference between generations and how we can leverage that. The third problem area is all around the new way people are consuming information. Again, it's something that has been written about hundreds of times, and we'll cover that. And then finally, again, more tactical in nature, this 4th problem is how do you manage and leverage unstructured learning throughout the organization? This being not the stuff you would keep in your learning management system necessarily, but all the other things you have in your organization that you can leverage to drive home learning. So let me just blow the first one out. So employee engagement. As I said, this is probably one of the biggest buzzwords in talent management right now. In fact, you have some companies, especially on the West Coast, like Airbnb, who are changing their HR brand almost to remove the word HR and talent away, and they're now people engagement divisions. So this is really becoming a big thing. So much so, in fact, that in a Harvard Business Review article, it said that 7 out of 10 of executives that they surveyed ranked engagement as being one of the key components of driving organizational success, driving towards their goals. But conversely, only 1/4 of them are doing this well, actually have engaged workforce. So there's obviously a gap there where it's something that's really important, but not everyone's doing a great job. And I actually think that 24% is actually a bit high. From some of the places I've worked and some of the customers, it seems like a large percentage of the workforce, 24% might be a bit high. And by engagement, this really goes throughout all of the levels. So from the very top, engaging with the company itself, your employees, feeling some kind of relation to the company, living the values that the company defines, and all driving towards those shared goals and objectives. That's going to get the company where it needs to be. And obviously, you can scale that down to specific divisions and managers. This also goes through your day-to-day job. So how can you engage people to actively try to add value outside of the daily tasks they perform, but actually try and add value outside of that? And on top of that, owning their own careers. And they're only going to do this if they're engaged and they know exactly, they have some passion and belief that what they're doing matters, and there's a real reason for it. And then owning your careers is just massive as well, because in this case, you really don't have to put a ton of effort into career development initiatives, because they're going to just have the definition laid out for them, and they're going to own it, and they're going to do all the hard work for you. And then this scales down to delivering specific L&D programs. So you roll out a new LMS, say. The engagement and the acceptance of that LMS, the participation in that project, and then the eventual return on investment of that program is really all to do with engagement and how can you move the needle on this. So when we later talk through some of the things about competency management and technology delivering learning, I'm not saying that's going to completely solve engagement, but if it just moves the needle a tiny bit, you're going to get that ROI straight away. Next problem, something I call the feedback gap. And this is really to do with, I'm not a big fan of categorizing different generations like millennials and so on, but this is more about the younger generation and how they expect to receive feedback and the frequency of that. So we all know, well, I think we've probably all read hundreds of times before, again, that millennials expect feedback on a really regular basis. And what does regular mean? It doesn't mean monthly. It doesn't even mean weekly. This means like a day-to-day kind of feedback or an action-driven feedback. So after you finish the project or a job, you get that immediate feedback from your supervisor or an SME. And at the same time, it's important not to just think about this as a pat on the back and a tick-the-box exercise to bolster their their views. Is that it needs to be objective and specific feedback that they can then use to understand how they are doing and what they need to do to progress. And in a PwC article I read, some of the quotes there, but I think the most important one is at the end, where only 1% of the people surveyed said it wasn't important to them. So that means 99% of the millennials that were surveyed said that this in some way is really important to them. 50% of them said it's highly important and it should be given on a frequent basis. So this is, again, key. Again, if we can move the needle here on the way that someone gets feedback, that will in turn add to the engagement and so on. And then the issue is most standard mechanisms out there that we have at our fingertips in talent and L&D don't really support this in what I've seen and when I've worked with my customers. They're more built on the annual performance appraisal with maybe a mid-year review and then just communicating to managers that they need to meet with their employees more frequently. And that's really hard to manage and to make sure that's happening in a progressive way. So you need to have these tools and mechanisms and business processes to support this feedback. And again, it needs to be really well defined as well. It needs to be objective, data-rich feedback that they can use and own. So the big question is, how can we put the processes and technologies in place to really drive this management cultural shift forward? The third problem is, again, something we've spoken about many times before, and there's lots of literature on this, is the evolution of how people are consuming information. Again, the millennials out there, or the younger generation, and I really think this goes beyond millennials personally. I think the majority of people out there, when they get introduced to a new concept or idea, learn better in this way. And this way being the information is provided to you in smaller chunks in different forms of media or mediums. So this is really important because not only is that the way that people prefer to learn and learn better and consume data, but even switching it around to the delivery side of things, it has a bottom line impact as well. Multi-hour classroom training sessions are generally very expensive to put on, often wasteful as well with the empty seats, the problems of scheduling and so on. And a lot of cases don't have the intended impact on the audience. we've seen many times with some of the customers that we speak to and the literature I've read, that when you have these traditional learning plans put in place on a yearly basis, you get these peaks and troughs of consumption of learning, where just before the end of that cycle where they have to have all their training courses complete, they will take the training as a tick-the-box exercise so they can just say they've done it, and then you have a trough for the next few months before it has to peak again. And that has quite a few impacts on your company if you get into that rhythm. One, it doesn't make the best use of resources. It's inefficient to have that peak and trough rather than a steady stream. And two, going back to that first key problem of engagement, the employees aren't engaged if they're just going through this cycle to check a box. The place you need to get to, and if classroom training isn't always the best approach, as I believe, you need to get to a place where you're delivering training and learning in a way that the employees want to consume and own and then proactively take. And then you'll see a much flatter consumption of learning throughout the year, and you won't have to go through this peak and trough exercise each year. The final problem I think we can dive in today and to try and move the needle on is the management of unstructured learning. And by unstructured learning, I'm talking about on-the-job training and courses and just great information that's out there in your organization that's not managed in your central learning management system. Just to take a specific use case here of your operations division, they don't normally have the luxury to go through the same training methods as some other folks in your company. We have some real pressures on them about time to revenue. If you think about, as an example, oilfield services, we're in Houston, oilfield services. The largest percentage of their population are obviously operators and technicians out on the field. With the time to revenue pressures that they have, they need to go out onto the field as soon as possible, learn on the job, maybe assisted by mentors or reference documents, procedures, how-to guides, videos, and so on. And the management and delivery of this is so important because it has a direct impact on not only bottom line because it impacts time to revenue, but also safety. If you're out in the field and you have an outdated reference guide or procedure manual, and you're working on a piece of equipment, that could be a real problem if it's a different piece of equipment and the manual hasn't been updated. And that's a pretty hard process to go through of delivering this information to the employees in real time. And then secondly, because it's managed in so many different ways, how can you measure which is the most effective method now? Is it the how-to guide, or is it a YouTube video that shows them step-by-step what they need to do? It's really hard to efficiently understand which method is best, and then to ensure that method is being applied across the organization. So that's the other problem that I think competency management and technology can really start to move the dial and give you some ROI. Okay, so now we've discussed the problem. I'm just going to jump into the first part of the solution. And again, I'm not saying that competency management and technology are going to solve all of your problems. But this, I strongly believe, and from our customers, we can prove that it actually moves the dial. You can start to get that benefit on all these areas. I think there might be a question. Give me 1 second, guys. Okay, don't think so. Okay, so competency management. What do I mean by this, first of all? I use competency management in more of an umbrella sense of the term. So it's not your traditional performance-based 5 key competencies in the organization. No, it's more objective than that. It's more transactional and tactical than that. So I call it the entirety of assigning, assessing, and tracking the knowledge, skills, experiences required to perform specific activities. So that's basically breaking down what do you do as an organization into a ton of specific objective items, which we call competencies. And then you can further define them into a set of performance criteria so you know exactly on a scale where you can measure someone against them. But this in itself is really powerful. Building this taxonomy and understanding your organization and aligning your needs to the organizational needs is key. And it's sometimes kind of daunting to do that for a large organization because they have so many jobs in so many divisions with skill sets performing so many activities. Obviously, that's a big task to undertake. And when we work with clients, we always tell them to be really specific and pilot out the key areas. If you know you're having some issues in a certain location and job, start there. Make that your easy win, and then you can kind of build out from there and use, obviously, all of the key learnings from that. So once you have that, you can align your workforce really with the operational demand. So you have that taxonomy. But the big win is when you start assessing people against that. And then you can have the delta analysis of what your company needs, what the skills, knowledges, experience, abilities that your company needs, and what can your guys actually offer. Where do you need to invest your learning and your development dollars specifically to close these competency gaps? Not general kind of initiatives, but really specific about how we can move the needle on these areas. We also find that this assessment process really does engage your workforce. And engagement can work in two ways, right? You can engage your workforce because they're getting assessed. And by the way, when I talk about competency management, these are ad hoc, real-time assessments. You need that to build a culture of assessment. So every time someone performs an activity, if there's someone there that can give them some real feedback based on that competency data that's already been defined, that's huge. It engages people. It gives this culture. Halliburton are a really good example of a company that have this embedded in their culture. Every time they perform a job, if it's in the field, but even in the head office, they have an assessment process going in place. So even now, I could be being assessed on how to communicate these kind of ideas in a webinar, as well as giving a demo later. So it's just that real-time assessments that build this culture. And engagement works the other way as well. The company being, or the business being engaged in your workers. So once you understand what they can do, you know the right people to speak to, how to talk to them about what they need to focus on, and so on. It really gives you that visibility into your workforce, which I think often is lacking, and it's based more on performance scores and just thoughts about people and general conversations. Then you can plan for the future. You know exactly what you have today from your assessments, exactly what your company needs today from your competency taxonomy and your role profiles and so on. But then you can start thinking about tomorrow. 5 years' time, my company is going to change. We're looking to diversify. We're looking to build a new asset. Building this new asset requires these competencies. Then you can start asking the question, who has these competencies? Do I need to develop these guys, or do I need to go to the market? It just opens all of these questions up with real data and real objective data. And then finally developing. Once you've gone through the assessment cycle and you know what your gaps are today and tomorrow, then, like I said a few times, it really directs your learning and development dollars, which I'll speak about in a bit more detail shortly. So we really see competencies, when done right, again, starting small and expanding as that really objective single currency that can drive this process of understanding your workforce, aligning, engaging, planning, and developing your workforce. And on the flip side, the other win for you guys in the L&D world is really how does this interact with talent management or integrated talent management. We see that being the bedstone of integrated talent management. This, again, is the currency that strings all of these separate business processes together. So we're going to jump into learning management in a second, or learning and development. But if you think about succession planning, again, you know the key roles in your business. Maybe you need to also think about some of the key technical roles. If you have a really talented chief engineer in a specific technology, if that guy goes away, you need to make sure you have a plan in place to replace him. Otherwise, obviously, that's going to have an impact. And again, we see competency management as the foundation that can drive that. And I'm going to talk about how the technology can make a big impact shortly too. Recruiting, kind of similar. When you go out to market for a position, you can reuse this great content you've already created and maybe even go through a competency assessment as part of the recruiting process, so you know there are gaps from the get-go, and you can start closing those gaps through the onboarding process too. And then finally, business strategy, because obviously everything comes down from there. Everything's cascaded from your strategy and your goals, and that's translated into the competencies and makeup of your workforce. So I'm pretty passionate that competency management really can start to move the dial on each one of those things that we saw before. Just jumping into more detail on the learning management part of this. There we are. So we see with our customers that the insight that competency management can give you when performed correctly with a good system to back it up can really focus you and get the most out of your learning investment. Obviously, training is incredibly expensive to put on, to manage, to maintain, to plan. So just focusing that and becoming a bit more efficient of where you should invest your dollars, where would get the most bang for your buck, would make a big impact. So the way that competency management would interact is a couple of ways. First of all, I like to always point out in this slide that competency management and learning management are two very separate things, separate business processes, and have different requirements, therefore need different systems to support them and drive them. Learning management obviously is the entirety of managing the curriculum, the courses, the sign up for the courses, the resource allocation, all that good stuff. Competency management, going back to the previous slide, is about creating your catalog of competencies, your role mapping, your assigning these to your people, the assessment process itself, and then developing against the competencies. So they're separate, but they're very much tied together, and we see them as the demand and supply equation. So once you start tying specific learning, whether it's through your LMS, very structured or unstructured throughout your company, to competencies, it gives you a great visibility. Because you know what your gaps are, you then know the learning that's tied to those gaps that you need to start putting on and supplying more of. You also can start to do analytics that look at, if you tie learning to competence, that maybe this course is really buying you nothing. No one's taking it, but they're all competent, for example. That could be a question you could answer through this. So why are we even putting this on if it's not really gaining us anything? And then conversely, you might have a wide area, a massive gap of competence in your organization. And you can drill into that and understand there's no learning to support it. And that's maybe one of the causes of this gap in your organization. So it is really powerful. But the other side of this is not only getting this high-level understanding of how you can spend your dollars and maybe where the best courses are, but it's also with the delivery as well. And this is where we talk about contextual learning. So if you just have a learning plan assigned to you, like I said earlier, on a yearly basis, that's going to lead to lack of motivation to take it. I'm not sure why I need to take this. Corporate are telling me to take this course, so on, things that we've all heard before. But once you expose it through competencies, it adds the context of your job. So I have these competencies assigned to me because I perform whatever job. I'm a driller, say, again, in Houston, so using the oil and gas reference. So I have these sets of competencies assigned to me. Now I know I have gaps in these three competencies, which is really bolstered by these learning activities. So that's why I need to take them. That's the context right there. I need to sign up for these right now, and I need to become competent. Because maybe if I'm not competent, I can't perform my job without supervision, those kind of things. So it really can buy you from the high-level management of your learning management and learning strategy, but also down to the delivery and consumption of learning. And that's something we're going to cover now in the next slide. So we talked about concepts and processes, But now I'm going to move to technology. And how can technology enable this kind of thing? And as I said at the very beginning, everyone has a smartphone, or most people have a smartphone on them at most times. Or they're sitting in front of a laptop. Even out in remote areas or rigs and so on, there's generally a spot where you can go on your mobile device. So you need to leverage this the best way you can, as frequently as you can, to get this data into your employees' hands. For a few reasons. So it's really hard to have a culture of continual assessments if you're always tied to your desk, because that isn't where the assessment should take place. The assessment should take place whilst you're doing that activity, whilst you can demonstrate you're doing something. If you need to perform the activity, demonstrate it, come back to your desk, write about it, then have a meeting with your supervisor or the assessor, whoever, that just adds so much more time and burden to the assessment process. You need to empower your people to be assessed at any time, at any place, the time that makes sense to them. So obviously, if they have a mobile device on them, that becomes huge, because at any time they're performing the activity, they can be assessed then and there. Furthermore, you could capture it. Most mobile devices have cameras on them, so you could actually record it. You could, if it's a really key safety competency, maybe you need that evidence. If it's more high-level behavioral, maybe you don't need it, and you just need to have that conversation and see it being occurred. But leveraging technology really drives home the culture of continual assessments, and allows you to do it anywhere. And then, again, delivering this learning to the employee at any time and any place is huge too. So when I was talking through the unstructured learning earlier, I was saying one of the biggest issues are delivering these unstructured items to people when they need them and making sure it's up to date. If it's a pamphlet or piece of paper, a booklet, it's quite often it's going to get lost, or it's going to be old and out of date and not in the hand when they need it. But if everyone, again, has their phone on them at most times, so delivering it, using that technology to deliver that training and that reference material, unstructured learning, directly to the person when they need it, again, is huge and has impacts on not only their ability to perform their job, but also the safety implication as well. No one wants there to be a safety incident, of course, and if they have the right information available to them at any time, obviously there's going to be an impact on that, and they're going to be safer in their workplace. And then finally, I think we would all agree that technology generally leads to a reduction in costs, especially over manual processes, just the efficiencies it gives you with automation of assignments, of workflow, and so on. That single database to store all the information, the ability to then have a framework that you can roll out to different organizations in different locations. It all leads to the fact that you can reduce costs. So that's, again, very, very important. So that's really my case so far for how technology mixed with competency management can really drive forward this idea of continuous real-time workplace assessments, as well as the delivery of learning directly to the person, contextual learning. So I'm going to now go through a demo of our system. Before I do that, it's going to take me maybe 30 seconds to set it up, but before I start the setup, I'm just going to tell you a bit about our system and really the driver for why we built it and why we built our app, which I'm going to show you shortly. So when we were, before our technology division even existed at Hula, again, we were a services company, we had all of these real requirements, and it started in the oil and gas industry. Throughout the supply chain and different verticals within oil and gas, we were getting these requirements through about operations-led competency management. And the tools and systems and technologies that HR, which are generally our customer base, could provide just didn't cut it. They were too old school in focus of performance appraisals and so on. And we had to bend them in 7 different ways to even half match the operational real requirements. So that drove us to why don't we just build it itself? We know the specific requirements of operations. We've worked with them on tens of projects, and we also have all this experience in the HR world of business processes and data model of HR. So we can really in a perfect position to bring these together. So that's where we built Kahuna from, and that's our SaaS solution that we sell to many customers. But then we started getting these additional requirements through from our customer base and people we spoke to outside of our customer base. This is a great solution, but again, we need this to be mobile compliant everywhere. Our system is already mobile compliant, but you needed connectivity. So that's why we created our app, the Kahuna mobile app, which is really focused on the idea of continuous assessments anytime, any place. It's an assessment app. It doesn't have the bells and whistles of our full website, but it really is focused on the fact that in our application, you can go from online mode to offline mode, sync all the data, go out into a remote site, perform assessments. As soon as you get connectivity again, you sync up that data back into the system. In that case, you don't have to be tied to your laptop. You can continue to have these assessments throughout the workplace in real time when it matters. So I need 1 second just to log in. I believe in live TV they say never to work with children or animals, and I think in the world of webinars it's never to do live demos, but it's my birthday and I'm going to do it anyway. So 1 second. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see my phone now on the screen. I'm just looking on my colleague's computer. You can, that's great. So I'm just going to walk you through a brief demo of our application just to show you some of the things that we built in to really help the world of continuous assessments and delivering learning. So in this case, it's opened on myself, Tom White. You can see that I have some competencies assigned to me. At the top of the screen, it's going to show you some information about me. We just pull that from our main system. And then you're going to see something we call a status bar, or square in this occasion. And this is all of the different statuses a competency can sit in Kahuna, and then a count of the competencies in there. So I have 36 competencies assigned to me. I can see that. And I haven't done a great job of assessing. So I have 33 and not assessed, so I haven't started the process yet. And then 3 in pending, which means I've completed the self-assessment, but I'm waiting for my assessor to finish that. If I, excuse me, that's my daughter. If I scroll over, I can see my team. And my team is basically anyone who I'm the supervisor of or I am the assessor of. And they're 2 different things, which I won't go into too much detail today. If you would like more information on this, please just reach out and we can have a deep dive. But you can have those 2 sets of people in your purview. So I can see I have 4 people to look at or to assess in my team. I could be out on the rig, or I could be in the office just going around performing assessments. If I toggle at the top of the screen, you can see there's a connectivity toggle. And at the moment, I'm in offline mode. So that means I've went through the process of syncing all the data to offline, and now even if I was in airplane mode on my phone, I could still perform assessments, still capture that great data, and then push it back into the system. So if I was to go to an employee or someone who reports to me, I can click on Suzanne, and then I can get to this screen. Again, very similar to my own profile, but it's Susan's profile. Again, you can see she's a bit further along the process than I am. She's got 2 competencies that she's already competent in, and she has a couple of competencies where she isn't competent. I'm going to go to not assessed, and this is the drill down into the specific competencies that sit in this status. So you're going to see 4 competencies here, and the first 3 are very much technical in background. So we have emergency preparedness, HSE policy, simulation operations. These are because she is in the exploration offshore division. She's been assigned these. But we also have the 4th line item of adapts. And this is showing you that we can, our system and systems should, technology should be able to manage multiple different types of competencies in the same system, in the same process. So the bottom one's more behavioral, more leadership-based. And the interesting thing about that, just from a content perspective, we've seen some great linkages between these more behavioral competencies and positive safety outcomes. So obviously, you could see a direct line between HSE or emergency preparedness or whatever and safety outcomes. There is that correlation there. Something that surprised me is that these softer behavioral competencies have a massive impact too. It does kind of make sense when you think about it. So with that in mind, you need to have a technology that can support all of these different types of competencies, again, because you'd want to use the same system for different levels within the organization and different types of employees within the organization too. So I'm going to launch a competency here called HSE policy. And it dives into an assessment form. And in this view, we kept it as simple as possible to start off with. So we've just got the competency and then whatever the configured proficiency scale is associated with that competency. So here it's aware, basic, proficient, mastery. Super simple, just to allow people who already know the breakdown to assess as quickly as they can, move on to the next competencies. Because when it's in real time, and you can't really just stand around waiting for things to happen. But if you need to dive in, all you do is click on the proficiency level, and then you can get a deep dive into the specific criteria that make up that level. So you can see here for aware, there's one performance criteria or behavior that makes up aware, and in basic we have two. You can have as many as you need. Really, you want to make it as objective as possible and as defined as possible, without, on the flip side, you don't want to have so much information that just stops the assessment process in its tracks. So it's a bit of a balance, but I think this is a good amount of detail where you're not just putting your finger in the air and saying someone's proficient. You can look through and say, do they demonstrate, do they have these sets of things? On top of that, I don't have this in this example. You can also make any of these behaviors linked to learning. So you can link a competency to a training course, that's fine, or a reference material or to a document, that's fine too. But you can also link a behavior to the same thing. And the important thing about that is that it enforces prerequisites of training. So if, for example, this first one, recognize the purpose and contents of corporate local HSE policy, if that was an online test, a video, a reference document, I, as the assessor, wouldn't be able to do this and check it off. That would be purely fed by the fact that I've completed that training. And in that way, it forces the prerequisite. I can complete all the other performance criteria, but if I haven't completed that course, then I'm not competent. I'm not able to perform that activity. So through the assessment method, you'd go through, you could click on any of these items that the person has demonstrated at the top level or drill down to the bottom level. We even have comments and descriptions beneath the performance criteria too. At any time, you can add attachments as well, where you could take a video of the task being performed, and then you can complete assessment, which is the green button at the top. I'm not going to do that right now. I'm actually going to toggle to online mode to show you Wi-Fi only mode, to show you the ability that we have to expose training to the end user. So I'm now going to go to a competency in the not yet competent section. Obviously, just to make it clear, if you're in offline mode and you have a link to a website where the training is stored, that's not going to be able to link to that website. Only in online mode would you be able to do that. Okay, it's just taking a second to load the trials and tribulations of doing the live demo in Sandbox. So that's just going to load and show you two competencies. And the competency I'm going to look at is emotional resilience. And in this competency here, just by clicking on it, you can, we've uploaded some unstructured YouTube training, which is a TED Talk actually, that's related to emotional resilience. So it's going to take a second to load, but then I'm going to open up the learning resources, and straight away you can see there's a learning resource associated to this competency. And I can just click on it, and it's going to go straight to YouTube to show this video, which we don't have to sit together and watch a TED Talk. But again, that's another way you can expose this training in real time to the end user, whether it's a video, YouTube, or corporate, a reference document. If someone's out on the field and they are performing a lockout tagout, they would come here, they would pull up the lockout tagout competency or pressure testing operations in this case, and then they could get the reference material then and there when they need it, a training manual, step-by-step guide to how to perform that activity, and being assessed at the same time. So I'm just going to pause there and ask if we have any questions with the audience. I've seen a couple of times the question icon has appeared, but I haven't been able to get to it. Let me just get to the control panel. It looks like it was Ken chatting to the team. Okay, guys, I'm just going to pause there. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to go through them right now, or if you have, if you want to have a deeper dive, you're more than welcome to contact myself or Karen, who's with me in the room right now, who's our account executive, and we can schedule a deeper dive at any time. So just let me know if you have any questions. We'll keep it open for a minute or two, and then I'll pass it back over to Janet. Okay, doesn't look like we have much coming through at the moment. Ken, did you see something come through, or are we good?
I have not seen any comments or questions.
Okay. Oh, looks like we just had one come through. Okay, one from Joshua. So he asked, how is our system different to our competitors? He was saying that we have different systems out there, and specifically what's different about ours compared to some of the systems that he's seen. So that's a good question. So as I alluded to earlier, one of the things that we saw when we started to build Kahuna was how other companies or other customers were trying to leverage traditional talent management systems to perform this more tactical, detailed operation business process. So generally our competitors are the larger companies where it comes to success factors, performance or learning management system, something like that, or a Taleo or PeopleSoft and so on, Workday. But that's just because that's all that the talent organization or HR can provide. When we actually start speaking to these customers about their processes and technology, we really see that it's not really a competition at that point. They're just trying to leverage what they have to perform that activity. When you get down to the detailed operational requirements, they don't really have anything in place. They see competency management more of a supporting module to help the talent side, like performance. So it's not really suited for these more detailed competencies and assessment processes. So yeah, that's generally what we've seen when we speak to customers. And that really is what sets us apart too. I think it's our knowledge of both the HR data model and how to leverage that data, and that's actually really important when it comes to the efficiencies you can get through technology. So just to build on that, one of the more difficult challenges of competency management is to ensure that every employee has the right set of competencies assigned to them, which could be a big task. As I'm sure a lot of you are aware, on the LMS side of things, it's kind of similar, right? To assign a set of curriculum or courses to people who, through assignment profiles is normally a challenging activity. But the one thing here that we have is not only do we have the mechanisms from a technology perspective to make this easier, we also have that knowledge of the HR data model that we can leverage. And by that I mean we have quite a few ways to perform this activity in Kahuna. The ideal way is something called an assignment rule. And that's where you can leverage any of the HR objects, organization, job, function, family, location, country, grade, any of those kind of standard HR objects. And you can create a rule to assign sets of requirements to your people. But as we know, some of the master data isn't always there to support that kind of process. So we try to think of more tactical ways. So we built another mechanism in the system to be able to enable supervisors or local admins, training admins, to assign requirements on the fly. We call it the assignment matrix, which really has the people out there and then the requirements assigned to them on the screen, and then you can dynamically move stuff around and assign stuff in real time. So that's just one of the ways that we think we're different from our competition. Okay, guys, I don't think I see any other questions here. Okay, so I think that's all we have today. Janet, over to you.
Thank you so much, Tom, for sharing with us, and Karen, thank you also. We appreciated all this great information. I'm sure some of our folks who attended will be getting in touch with you afterward to get more of a deep dive into the info that you provided with us. I took great notes, and so I really appreciate what you shared. Thanks again, everybody, for attending. And this completes our webinar for today. Have a great day.